Hey everyone, Simon here for the Ether Hub, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. And I've said that same line to you guys in this community for a long time now. I've covered the story of Magic the Gathering specifically for over 7 years now, but I still haven't gotten close to attempting what I hope to do with this new series on the channel. The timeline of Magic's story is a bit complicated. It's hard to find the right sources, books, articles, flavor texts that help flesh out the lore from expansion to expansion. I want to help players both old and new who are interested in learning the entire story of MTG but just don't know where to start or get lost along the way. And this series will be the perfect guide for all those Vorthos fans in our community. This is episode 1 of the complete Magic the Gathering story, and what better place to start than with the very first sets in Magic's history, Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited. If you want to support our efforts with this series, consider supporting the project by becoming a channel member or by gifting a membership. All you have to do is click that little join button that you see right on the channel's homepage. With your support, I can keep an editor for the channel so that we can continue with this high quality content. And if you become a member, you will also gain access to a members only series that I'm running on the channel right now. You'll get exclusive weekly lore videos meant only for members as a means of me saying thank you so much for that support. You can also help this series by leaving these videos a like, becoming a subscriber, and of course sharing this video with friends. It all goes a long way in helping us out. And with all that out of the way, let's get back to the lore. Starting at the very beginning of Magic itself, the first 3 sets of the game, Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited, laid the groundwork of MTG. They were all released in 1993 and quickly grew a large player base who were enthralled by the high fantasy tabletop card game. Back then, however, the game wasn't specifically designed with a story in mind. These base sets were essentially a proof of concept for the gameplay, the mechanics that make the game work. And so a fully fleshed out world or story wasn't really at the forefront of Richard Garfield's mind. Though there was no true cohesive story across Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited, that's not to say the game's lore didn't also lay its groundwork across these first basic sets. With the nearly 900 cards found in these 3 original sets, the tradition of flavor text on cards was established. And with it was the birth of flavor. Flavor in the Vorthos community are the elements of the game that helps to build a magical world or a fantastical idea that isn't 100% reliant on a written story. A card's flavor text, for example, is one way the game can convey a story or world building without the presence of written material. Still, there was a general idea for the game that was presented to players. Not a story per se, but at least a way for people to experience and play within the universe of Magic the Gathering. When 2 people sit down for a game of Magic, they take on the role of planeswalkers, powerful magicians who settle disputes through duels. In these duels, they summon powerful monsters and spells and duke it out. These, of course, are the cards the players themselves interact with. As rudimentary as it is, this idea of planeswalkers and the players actually summoning creatures and champions would go on to define other, more refined aspects of the game's lore later on. Years later, we will see planeswalker characters have the power to summon these same monsters us players were meant to summon. And of course, planeswalkers remain an integral part of MTG's lore to this day. So while Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited didn't have an official story, it created ideas that went on to establish the future story of the game. There was also plenty of flavor, some of which would go on to directly inspire future lore plot points. As we discussed, Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited didn't have a story, but that's not to say there wasn't a world built with the game in mind. Though not placed on any particular plane in the still very young and very much not developed multiverse, there were numerous mentions to places that would eventually form the plane of Dominaria, one of the most important planes to the early stories of Magic the Gathering. Take cards like Banalish Soldier and Shivan Dragon. On their own, the descriptive nature of their names could have been discarded as fluff, but instead they grew from this small cameo to become major regions to the established world building of Dominaria. Funnily enough, both of these Alpha cards would go on to define the flavor of these regions. Shiv being a mountainous region teeming with dragons, and Benalia, which would become home to some of the greatest heroes of Dominaria, steeped in honor, chivalry, and knights. Similarly, Rock of Kur Ridges speaks of another mountain range that, in the story, is more famously associated with kobolds. See Kobolds of Kur Keep, for example. These cards establish flavor not only through card name and art. Flavor text is also a great way that MTG can translate its story from the cards themselves, and both Benalish Hero and Shivan Dragon make great use of flavor text to help build a deeper understanding of monsters and cultures found in Magic the Gathering. Another example of this world building would be Llanowar Elves. This mana dork has been around for a long time, and while the art direction has changed a great deal over that time, it helped to establish the Llanowar Elves as a tribe of Dominaria even way back in Alpha. Although legendary creatures had not yet become a thing, there were still those that hinted at prominent figures in the overarching MTG mythology. Take Serra's Angel, for example. Serra as a character had not yet been fleshed out, but even in Alpha, the seeds were planted for this titanic figure as well as her angels to become canon. While this represented a white-aligned legendary, its enemy color too had its start in Alpha with Sengir Vampire. Much like Serra's Angel, this card would go on to build out one of the most famous legendary vampires, Baron Sengir, as an established figure in the MTG story. Nevin Jarl's Disc is another piece of flavor that hinted at an eventual legendary creature. This artifact could have been tossed in the bin as just some fantastical wizard's disc, but instead it was picked up and the story of a powerful lich rose around it, as we finally got to see the disc's owner, Nevin Jarl, printed on their own card in Commander Legends, revealing they are a zombie wizard and once tyrant of Urborg on Dominaria. While there are other cards now tied to established MTG lore, probably the most important to come out of these early sets were the building blocks to one of the most important stories in MTG history. The artifacts, Ankh of Mishra and Glasses of Urza, don't do a lot in terms of building up two of the most famous characters in Magic, but this was technically their humble start. Two relatively unrelated artifacts. Who would have thought that from these seemingly unrelated cards, the brothers Urza and Mishra and their multiversal feud would eventually blossom? I don't feel like I need to give a crash course on Urza and his importance to the MTG story, but both he and Mishra were crucial in the early days of MTG lore, putting into motion and acting as heroes and villains in the Brothers' War, as well as Phyrexia's invasion of Dominaria. And that all started in Alpha with an Ankh and a pair of glasses. Urza's importance was also hinted at early on because he got another Alpha artifact attributed to him, Sunglasses of Urza. Not only did he have glasses, but because he was such a cool dude, they gave him sunglasses as well. Obviously means he's a hero in our journey throughout MTG's entire story. And since my tone didn't represent it correctly, that was very much sarcasm. I don't know why he has sunglasses. Urza is, at the very least in retrospect, a pretty controversial character. Certainly a far cry from an objective hero. Still, the sunglasses were cool. Back in 1993, with the inception of Magic the Gathering, its creators didn't realize right away the cultural phenomenon they were about to unleash upon the world. Really, a story to go with their game didn't stand out as important. As popularity grew, exploded really, the idea that there needed to be more than mechanics tying the cards to the players gained prominence, and soon, full-fledged story teams were crafting the lore of Magic the Gathering, with Alpha, Beta, and Unlimited laying the groundwork for what would eventually become Dominaria. Still, this is just the first chapter in the long storied history of MTG, and it would only get better from here. Join me as we continue this series, going through the entire story of Magic the Gathering. Make sure you stay up to date by becoming a subscriber and ticking that notification bell so you can catch all of our weekly videos. Remember, by hitting the join button and becoming a member, you'll also get exclusive content while continuing to support this channel. As always guys, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see ya!